Welcome to Playing for the Planet, How Sports Can Champion Conservation and Climate Action. We're going to be having a really important discussion tonight. I'm really happy to see this taking place. We'll introduce the panel momentarily. But we'll be discussing how to protect the natural environment, what the role that sports can play in that effort and how important that is. I'll introduce myself. I'm Brendan Buckley. I'm a Lamont research professor at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. If anyone knows where that is, it's about a half an hour to 40-minute ride up the Hudson River near the Tappan Zee Bridge area. I've been at Lamont since 1989 in the tree ring lab. I'm a dendrochronologist, so I work with tree rings and do a whole bunch of stuff related to climate change and how it affects the environment and societies around the world, primarily working in Southeast Asia and that part of the world. I'm the co-director of the Sustainability of Science, Masters of Sustainability Science program at SPS, and I also teach a class in that program. We're one of the sponsors along with Sustainability Management program. You'll hear more about them. I teach a class called Climate Change in the Global Forest, where I look at how the climate is affecting the planet and the forest and all the things that we're seeing that are really kind of troubling to us with the impacts of climate change. I also co-teach a course in the Cayman Islands with Bill Precht, who's here, called Sustainability and Resilience of Tropical Coastal Ecosystems. And I'm currently developing another class in Vietnam on tropical highlands ecosystems that is slated to launch this January. And while I spent my career working in the woods and doing a bunch of things with tree rings, I also have a background of being an avid sports fan and also played organized sports growing up, a lot of impact sports that account for all the injuries I had to my spine. I played football, basketball, and ice hockey. And as a little aside, the very first professional sporting event that I recall was 1967, watching the Ice Bowl game between the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys. That was the coldest game ever played at that time. I don't know if it still is. I was 9 years old and watched it with my dad. And in my adult life, I became more increasingly involved. I still played during college and graduate studies. I played intramural sports, and I played on a soccer club in Tasmania, where I did my PhD. And so I still continued to enjoy sports and play them quite far into my adulthood. But then I got more involved in outdoor sports, mountain sports, and things of that nature. And so to see this full circle of how sporting events and how sports in general, the sports industry, can be involved as a stakeholder, and more than a stakeholder, as a key player in the conservation conservation efforts and also in climate action is really important in the discussion points we'll be going through tonight. So we must acknowledge that the health of our natural environment is critical to the well-being of all human endeavors, including the future of sports. And that's why this panel is so important. Tonight we'll hear how sports organizations, venues, and athletes are stepping up, restoring habitats, promoting sustainable land use, reducing their ecological footprint, and using their influence to drive cultural change. Sports in its totality can inspire action in ways that science alone cannot. And when those worlds come together, the potential impacts are enormous. Now, this evening's event is a collaboration between the two Sustainability Masters programs here, Sustainability Science and Sustainability Management. So on behalf of the organizers, I thank you for attending and being part of this very important conversation. And with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Chandler Precht. So Chandler is an alumna of the Sustainability Science program, and I had her as one of my students in the second time I taught the class at the height of the COVID pandemic, so it was all online. So I only knew her from the neck up. So when I first saw her and I realized what an imposing figure she is, and then I met her family and see that she comes from this family of really amazing athletes. So their entire family is athletic. Bill played collegiate hockey. And he's still willing to pull your jersey over your head and pummel you if you get mad enough. I've seen this firsthand, so I know it's true. All of his daughters are athletes, including Chandler, and you'll probably hear more about that. Chandler holds a BA in Environmental Science in Spanish and Latin American cultures, and a minor in chemistry from Columbia. She also received the MS in Sustainability Science from Columbia, where she was a multi-year recipient of the Sustainability Science Fellowship for Academic Excellence, Professional Merit, and Commitment to Sustainability Science. She's currently pursuing another MS from Columbia in sports management, interesting enough. And I could sum this all up by stating simply that Chandler really is a total badass. And so with that, no further ado, please join us and welcome Chandler and the various panelists.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Brendan. I am Chandler Precht, and it is a pleasure to be tonight's panel moderator. Welcome to Playing for the Planet, How Sports Can Champion Conservation and Climate Action. So this year's New York City Climate Week catchphrase or theme is Power On. And in sports, the power on moment is what we do when the stadium lights go up, when the scoreboard starts to glow, and when we really lock in. In sustainability, our power on is when we're making a call to action, a call for urgency, creativity, and resiliency to combat some of the world's most pressing issues. And those can include climate change, habitat destruction, biodiversity loss, just to name a few. And tonight, we're not just talking about powering on, we're doing it. And tonight's panel, I have some serious powerhouses up here who have shown and are showing what it means for sports to stand up and play for the planet. I am being joined tonight by Merle Liivand, modern life mermaid and gold medalist, Lou Blaustein, CEO and founder of Eco Athletes, Mackenzie Feldman, founder and co-director of Rewild Your Campus, and Zach Ruiz, sustainability manager of the Kaseya Center with the Heat Group. I want to kick off tonight by asking each one of you what your power on moment was. What has inspired you, and how has your background shaped what you're doing today? So I'm going to start with Merle.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. It's an honor to be in Colombia. I told everybody in Estonia they think I'm a badass now.
You are.
But the power on to me as a swimmer came when I went to teach kids in Rio Olympics to empower kids to step on a sports. And while being there, Copacabana race, open water was going on. I actually was on a list, but there was a little bit not knowing if Russians are allowed to compete or not, because that time they had a drug problem. These days they have different problems. But I was actually on a wild card list, basically not knowing if I'm going to compete on open water or not. And while I was there cheering for my fellow competitors, I started seeing trash coming up on a beach. And I was like, if that happens on the biggest scale in the world, where also you can have a phone and you can film, what if it happens different places in the world where we don't have social media, or we don't have a phone, or we don't have major event? And I started asking the question, so what is open water? Open water is ocean, and it has to be good temperature. You have to have good weather, you know, not just the heat side of the water, but also the outside of temperature, and as well the plastic pollution, what can affect my sport. So while I was stepping into this Olympic dream, I started asking how I can change and empower sports world to think about marine pollution. And from there on, I became a mermaid.
Do you want us to talk about what that is?
Oh, let's go right there. So actually, I had a mermaid school to empower girls to love their curves. Because if you think about shark or manatees, shark, they swim really fast and they have curves. So I was starting a mermaid school in a sense to kind of, that girls can fall in love with their curves and be part of something active. And they don't have to be a gold medalist, they can be a mermaid. So I started teaching that. I was in Good Morning America, became really famous with that, but I was still pursuing my open water life. And when I was in Rio, one of the things what they asked was, can you show the kids in Rio to be a mermaid? And then Usain Bolt on 2019 was thinking I'm a 10K Olympic open water swimmer with a mermaid tail. And I said, you're Usain Bolt. You should know this kind of sport doesn't exist in Olympics. But then he said, you should try that. And I was like, you're a Usain Bolt, why are you challenging this little mermaid here? And then he said, you should swim around Jamaica. And I was like, have you seen there's caves around your island? But I went next day to practice, and I said, he saw a talent on me. So I'm going to figure out how to put the pollution problem, inspiring kids, and challenge the world to think about mermaids are badasses, right? So I got invited to Los Angeles test event, and I said, I'm going to swim 10K with the mermaid tail, and it's going to be a Guinness World Record. I got 5,000 no's. And I said, you know what? You guys film it and decide later. I'm going to do it. I didn't know even how. But I didn't know I'm going to change the record until the day before. That I'm going to swim 10K without using arms, meaning that you just kick. Because animals are getting stuck on a plastic and fishing net. And funny enough, I said that to Owen Wilson because I was in New York flying tours to Los Angeles, and we were working out together on a gym. And Owen Wilson said, this is cool idea. And I was like, here I am, Usain Bolt challenges me, Owen Wilson thinks I'm cool, I need to do it. So that's how the mermaid thing started, and today the record is 50 kilometers, meaning 31 miles without using your arms. And while I was doing that, I picked up 35 pounds of trash, and it became worldwide news everywhere.
Wow.
I know, it was so fast. Swimming.
So impressive. Lou?
I don't know how to follow that. Can we just move along? So first of all, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Chandler, for putting this together. And just before I get into my power on moment, I just want to say that in 2019, I and someone else in this space, Kristen Fulmer, some of you may know her, we put on the first green sports event at Fordham Law School in Lincoln Center, did it on kind of the shoestring, and the organizers of Climate Week, yeah, you know, sports, really? And now we have this. We have all sorts of, sports is having its moment. And from 2019 to now, that's 6 years, it is tracking the growth of the green sports movement more broadly. So you guys are a part of that, so thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So my power on moment actually comes from 9/11. So I was working in sports marketing, advertising sales, promotions, biz dev, because unlike most of you, I'm not an athlete. I'm just your basic sports nut who, if you need to know the entire roster of the 1969-70 world champion New York Knicks, alphabetically or by height, I can give that to you. And if you need to know this, why you need to know such information, that's your issue, but I know it. So I was like taking clients out to Knicks games when they were good. And I mean, this was a dream for somebody like me. And I was also an environmentalist, but my sports passion was here, my environmental passion was here. Then 9/11 happened. I was at Sports Illustrated for Kids, working there in Midtown at that time, and grew up my whole life in the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey area, went to college in New Jersey. This was my home. I felt like I had to do something. I didn't know anybody in the buildings personally, so that was fortunate for me, but I felt like I had to do something, but I didn't know what to do. And a couple of years later, there was an op-ed in the New York Times by Tom Friedman, who still writes for the New York Times, and he's this kind of global, big thinker, macro political writer, geopolitical writer, and the headline of it was "Green is the new red, white, and blue." And in it, he's saying that the wars on terrorism that we're fighting, because we were already in Afghanistan, we're about to go into Iraq, we are insanely fueling those wars by our incredibly profligate energy use, because this is before the fracking boom and the domestic production boom here. We were getting the lion's share of our transportation energy from Saudi Arabia. I'm paraphrasing Friedman. He's saying we're sending our money to Saudi Arabia, to the royal family. They have two imperatives: one, to stay the royal family, and two, to stay alive. So that meant they would divert some of that money to their Wahhabi extremists on their right to buy them off. And the Wahhabi extremists on their right used some of that money to train people to fly planes into buildings. This is all in his column. And it was like the compact fluorescent light bulb, because LEDs were not a thing then. This is 2001, young people, went off above my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I came to this from a patriotic impulse, which I'd never met anybody else who did. And I thought, I'm not that unique, but whatever. I bought a hybrid car when it was, I changed out all my light bulbs. I went 90% vegetarian, now like 97 or 98. But then I realized that personal virtue, so-called, isn't gonna make a huge difference. Important, certainly, but so then I said, I gotta work in this space. Green. What are green jobs? Green jobs are like, at that time and even now, installing solar panels. I'm a klutz. You don't want me on a roof, okay? So I'm good at creating stories, telling stories, selling stories based on fact. That's communications, marketing, sales. Did it in sports. That's a mature market. In green, not so much. There weren't jobs in it. So I went out and became a consultant in it. And that led me to make a living in that. And then in 2010, I started to say, is there an intersection of green and sports? Because that would marry my passions. And I found that there was this nascent group called the Green Sports Alliance that had formed. And soon after that, I started a blog called Green Sports Blog, greensportsblog.com, now Green Sports Pod. If you haven't read it, it's very good, I have to say. And then I started to meet everybody in this space, some of you who are here, and people started to read the thing. And that allowed me to talk to athletes who are environmentally minded. And I would ask them, oh, you're doing this great e-waste recycling drive. Wow, are you connecting that to the climate crisis? They'd say no. I'd say, that's a problem. And then I started to ask them, why not? And that led me down the road to forming Eco Athletes in 2020, a nonprofit that inspires and coaches athletes to lead climate action. And several of our 200+ Eco Athletes champions are here, including Merle the Mermaid, who is, I checked, Eco Athletes champion number 16.
Wow.
And anyway, hopefully that wasn't too long.
Great. Mackenzie?
Hi, thank you all for being here. So I came into this work. I was a Division I athlete at UC Berkeley. I was recruited there to play beach volleyball. And my power on moment for me happened one day when I showed up for practice. And our coach said, if the ball rolls off the court, we practice in a forest. So it was, a sand court surrounded by grass and trees. And our coach said, if the ball rolls off the court, just let it go because a toxic herbicide was sprayed around the court. And for me, I was already passionate about this issue of pesticides. I'm born and raised in Hawaii, and for those of you who don't know, Hawaii is ground zero for industrial agriculture. They do a lot of the GMO corn seed testing in Hawaii. And so as a result, they spray 17 times the amount of restricted use pesticides in Hawaii compared to the US mainland. And when I was in high school, I got really interested in this topic because there was a lot of grassroots community members in Hawaii who were getting sick from the drift from these pesticides, and they were trying to get these big agrochemical companies like Monsanto, which is now Bayer, like Syngenta, Dow, DuPont, out of Hawaii and to stop this testing. And I was so inspired by their grassroots organizing. I wanted to plug in, but I didn't know how. And so, you know, when I got to college and our coach said they're applying this toxic herbicide around the court, it felt like this LED light bulb, we had them by then, went off in my head, and I said, okay, this is my chance to do something. So me and my teammate Bridget, we asked our coach, can you put us in touch with the grounds manager? We talked with the grounds manager. He said he was spraying Ranger Pro, which is a glyphosate-based herbicide, essentially Roundup, if you're familiar with Roundup. And we said, can you just not do that around our practice? And he said, sure, I just don't have the staff to pick the weeds. And so we said, no problem, our team will pick the weeds. So we started doing that before practice. And me and Bridget thought, you know, wow, it's actually so easy to get things done when you are not just complaining about a problem, but you're actually coming with a solution. What if we expanded this to the rest of campus? What if we created a movement across UC Berkeley to ban all herbicides from the campus? So that's what we did. We got UC Berkeley to go completely organic. And yeah, it was, you know, and I think it's an important lesson to just meet people where they're at. And when you're talking to the grounds manager, like at first I was coming in really hot and very passionate about this, and why are you spraying all these toxic chemicals around, you know, young women in reproductive age, this is, you know, borderline criminal, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, of course you don't get anywhere. He didn't respond to my 15 emails. And then finally Bridget said, why don't we try something a little bit, you know, more kind? And, you know, we were like, thank you so much for everything you do. We really appreciate it. We would love to talk with you and be part of the solution to reduce pesticides on campus. And then he responded within 15 minutes, and we met. And we, yeah, so we teach our students the power of language. It's very important. And so I graduated in 2018. I hadn't really thought to continue this campaign beyond Berkeley, but there were students across the UC, University of California system, that were emailing me saying, we heard about what you did. Can you help us do this at our schools? And around the same time, there was a trial. I don't know how many of you heard of Dwayne Lee Johnson versus Monsanto, a groundskeeper in the Bay Area who got diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after applying the same herbicide, Ranger Pro. And he was suing Monsanto, the maker of the chemical company, one of the largest agrochemical companies in the world. And so I was very inspired to learn about this. I sat in on many days of the trial, and kind of the second light bulb moment for me happened there, where I was listening to his story, and I thought, man, how many other groundskeepers are there across this country that have no idea, you know, that they're putting themselves in harm's way? These bottles of chemicals, they don't have these warning labels on it. He did all of the right things. He wore his protective gear, and he still got terminal cancer. You know, I felt like I learned how to you know, get this banned at UC Berkeley. I felt like I had a responsibility to do this at other schools. And so that really haven't looked back since then. Started my organization, Rewild Your Campus. We're a small but mighty team. 2 of my colleagues are here today. We are, 8 of us, and all over the country. And we work with students at colleges and universities to eliminate synthetic pesticides and train groundskeepers on how to transition to organic, biodiverse land care. And I think I'm very passionate about empowering young people, because it feels like it can be so overwhelming now with everything going on. And it's something very tangible that you can do at your school, and it has ripple effects, you know. So that's how I got started. And I wish that your organization started when we just met a couple weeks ago, but it's like, you know.
We're going to collab.
Yeah, we're going to collab.
I'm bringing people together. What can I say? And Zach.
Hello, everyone. It's a hard 3 to follow up after, so I'll do my best here. So my name is Zach Ruiz. I'm the sustainability manager for the Miami Heat at the Casella Center, and I really think my power on moment started when I, first got to college and undergrad. I went to Bucknell University for track and field, and I got thrown into this Mindful Consumption Foundation class, which kind of like turned my head upside down. Because, growing up, we used to always joke of like a clean plate club, my family. I come from a big family, kind of always finish your food. And this class opened my eyes to these issues of food waste, like around the world. And I was sitting there, jaw like on the ground, like, how is no one talking about this more in our faces? So that was like the first seed planted of trying to figure this out. We started initiatives on campus, weighing all our food as it came out. I even remember talking to our catering company about composting, and they were like, we were composting. You guys are just generating so much, the farmer stopped accepting it because he couldn't process it enough. So I was like, this is a huge issue. So I kind of shifted my career my studies from accounting to environmental studies, focused on corporate sustainability, because to me, that's also similar to what Lou mentioned, is like, I can do certain stuff, but how do I amplify this message? How do I look at it from a bigger scale that's gonna move the needle? And then 2018 is when I really had my eureka moment. I was fortunate to attend the Super Bowl in Atlanta, and I got to see how an event like that, such large scale, turned the city upside down. I remember seeing this brand new stadium, Mercedes-Benz Arena, how beautiful it was, but also just all this detail they put into their sustainability framework and their plan. Additionally, walking out of the stadium, I saw how much waste and stuff was thrown on the streets and just left the city kind of in dust. And these people from LA and New England just were leaving. I'm like, this is what a city's left with, and it brought people all together. So then I had my idea of also being a sports nut myself. I was like, how do I solve this problem? There's a business here. This is a business. Hey, there's people coming from all over, and this is how you can kind of try to amplify these messages with these problems that I've been studying in my studies on a larger scale. I always use an example of, I'm a Yankee fan, and I know anywhere in the world I can most likely find another Yankee fan. So how do I tell these messages or these lessons? And at the time, there wasn't an answer for that. So then I went on to grad school and got my master's in sports leadership. So I always looked at ways to blend the two, and then just kind of actively started challenging people and how operations were and looking for those opportunities. And from there, I was fortunate to be with the Atlanta Hawks, and we were the first zero waste venue in the world. And I took then those expertise and talents and found my way to Miami, to Miami Heat, and see a similar kind of landscape. Different, I call it part of my social studies, not just my science and my social studies and engineering now I've learned, and just kind of looking at ways to amplify this message on such a larger scale. I always, see it and communicate it to these organizations of adding value to their existing branded impact. And so kind of following those or connecting those dots and seeing it such large scales made me really want to drive and be a leader in this space and make those change for these organizations. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So one thing that really stands out to me from all of your intros is the influence of athletes. So Merle, you have 5 Guinness World Records?
More.
How many? How many do you have now?
So what happens is I actually have done 5 is individual. 1 is depending on the office there. I did on ice, okay. And then 5 is also with the teams. But sometimes I don't know if I can say that because I can't control the team. But I have like a Guinness World Record on sauna.
Wow.
I have Guinness World Record on ice swimming relay.
There we go.
Most cleanup.
So at least 10.
Yeah, 10. Yeah.
So these world record swims that you've had, they have really become synonymous with ocean advocacy. So how do you see your personal brand driving cultural conversations about climate?
Oh, I think it's the best way that I'm a mermaid and I show up to the world leaders and I am making them to listen to mermaid and slap them with the mermaid tail when they don't listen to me. But
it's 10 pounds, so that would hurt.
10 pounds, exactly. But I'm going to tell you that I changed the law in Nicaragua on a sense that one of my friends was telling me that he bought the hotel and said they catch the fish with the dynamite. And I said, can you imagine if a mermaid comes to Nicaragua, my head will be there and the tail will be that side of the ocean. We need to fix that. And it was a many conversation, almost 10 years, and we got the mermaid law to the books in Nicaragua. So that means that no plastic straw is sold. They're trying to find a solution also that the cities doesn't burn the trash in the end of the night, so they actually started collecting like end of the streets, and no dynamites to catch the fish. Wow. And that just really was possible because I kept kind of on my jokey way to say, you know, mermaid, come on, mermaid will never come to see your volcano, and could you imagine what that will be doing? And it literally was that I changed one law in the world. Or for example, I was swimming in Copacabana Beach for 24 hours to raise awareness for marine pollution while they had all these G20 preparational talks going on. And I found at 2 a.m. I got hit by Havaianas flip-flops, and I put it on my suit. And next day when I saw their mayor and President Lula, and I said, you see this? I didn't got hit by a shark or a jellyfish. You need to fix this. But thankfully, because I'm a mermaid and I'm actually royal, I got knighted for my work, what I've done around the world, so I'm lady. Thankfully that I can go up to the world leaders and say, I'm not here to talk as a human, I'm really here to talk as somebody who represents 72% of the market. What is ocean? Because when we talk about world most influencer people, they're on the land. But the world market is 73% on a blue gold, what is ocean? So I'm finding, you know, those kind of swimmable ways to really talk with the world leaders or you know, people on the street. I sometimes educate them. I say, do you see this trash? We both can have a climate muscle, so let's pick that up, you know? So maybe that also keeps me positive on what I'm doing, and honestly, that also inspires, you know, not just the kids, because kids will go and tell the parents, oh, I had a swimming champion who, you know, picks up trash. No, they will say, mermaid told us we need to do better, and the parents will listen.
I love that. Now, Lou, Eco Athletes has now grown, as you said, to over 200 athletes. So what do you think motivates athletes to speak out, and what potentially keeps them from speaking out?
Great question. And there are several Eco Athletes champions out in the audience, and Merle here. So if I say anything that's off, you guys can correct me.
Step with the mermaid tail.
Right? So what inspires athletes to want to lead on this issue? I mean, there is not just one answer. However, a common theme is, for many, is that they play in nature. So we have a swimmer. We have a mermaid swimmer, ice swimmer, that is 33 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you scoring at home, and an open water swimmer all in one. We have rowers. We have more swimmers. We also have, but not here, golfers. We have sailors. We have athletes we have ultra marathoners, runners. They are all in nature, and they have experienced the impacts of climate change in their sport, in their life. And they see it firsthand, and they want to do something about it. That's one cohort. And then another cohort, and it's not like there's a Venn diagram of it. Then there are people who are just aware of the impacts of climate change that are currently happening, and they could be soccer players, they could be a basketball player who plays her or his sport inside, but they know, they see what's happening in the world and they want to do something about it. And athletes are the most influential humans on the planet. And there are data that show this. I refer you to a study, you can look it up on the internet. It's called Pantheon, and it's from MIT and others. And you can look at by country, all countries, over many decades, and it compares athletes to entertainers and politicians and scientists, et cetera, and athletes are always the most influential. So, and athletes have led on all manner of social issues going back decades, right? Civil rights, Jackie Robinson. Women's rights, Billie Jean King. Issues of war and peace, Muhammad Ali. LGBTQ issues, Billie Jean King. Where are the Billie Jean Kings and the Muhammad Alis of the climate movement? On climate and environment, to your second part of your question, athletes have largely, present company accepted, stayed on the sidelines. And why is that the case? Well, in the formation of eco-athletes, we talked to a bunch of athletes who are environmentally active but not going there on climate. Why not? And there are three main fears and obstacles. One is not unique to this space. That is, many report that it's too political. Okay, that's going to sideline some, but not all. The other two are unique. One is they tell us it's too sciencey, I don't know the science, I don't feel comfortable talking about the science. And we train athletes to overcome these fears, and one thing we say about that particular one is, how many of you athletes have been to a children's cancer ward or whatever? And if I'm talking to a bunch of athletes, a lot of hands go up. How many of you are oncologists? No hands go up. You do not have to be an expert. You just have to care and know that you want things to be better for our generation and the generations follow. The other one, and this is one we get the most, is I fly all over the place for my sport, and my personal or professional carbon emissions are through the roof. And this is a daunting thing. And we at Eco-Athletes work to demystify and defang this issue so that they can overcome it and hopefully become the Billie Jean Kings and the Muhammad Alis of the climate movement. Hopefully I answered your question.
I love that, yeah. Mackenzie, you used your voice as a student athlete. How do you think being an athlete shaped the way that you were heard?
Yeah, I mean, to Lou's point, I think college athletes have tremendous power on a campus. You know, of course, it depends on the division and your school and your sport, but overall, athletes have a lot of power on campus. And in combination with that, I saw the problem firsthand with my own eyes, right? It's like I show up, our coach gives us this warning, so quickly I tell my coach, and she's able to connect me right away to the athletics grounds manager. You know, students in general have a lot of power, but it might not happen so quickly, but because I have a direct line to my coach has a direct line to the athletics grounds manager, it happened very quickly. And because, you know, me and my teammate were able to say, hey, we are showing up for practice here every day. We don't feel comfortable being exposed to this chemical during practice. So that's a very fair ask to say, can you please not spray this where we're practicing, you know, so we can actually go and chase the balls that roll off the court. And of course, actually, my coach discouraged us from speaking out and said, hey, don't complain about this. Like, you should be grateful that they're taking care of the landscape. And I was like, well, yeah, but, you know, I think that we should be able to say something about this. And so I think that there's tremendous opportunities for athletes to speak out about this, especially if you're playing on a field. You know, whether you're uncomfortable that you're being exposed to toxic chemicals, most sports fields, pretty much all, are managed with synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. And athletes are coming into direct contact with that every single day that they're playing. Or if, you know, synthetic turf has its own issues of being really problematic for human health and the environment. But I think I wouldn't have even known that they were doing that if our coach never told us. And so I know that there's athletes showing up for soccer practice, showing up for games, you know, any athlete playing on a field that has no idea that they're being exposed to toxic pesticides. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for athletes to use their voice in this way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that major sports organizations and venues play an important role there, and they can really set the tone for fans, for athletes, and communities. So Zach, I'm going to turn to you now to talk about renovations and upgrades that have been made at the Kaseya Center and what that's meant for your venue operationally.
For sure. Yeah, I know. So for us especially, we focus our sustainability goals hand in hand with our Heat basketball and Kaseya Center, because we want to speak to our Heat fans as well as our concert goers and everyday fans and just citizens in Miami. We see that, you know, when I first got there, never been to Miami, in my first 6 months or so, was just getting to know the people, getting to know the issues, getting to learn what's passionate for our staff, our guests, and figure out how to problem solve these issues. And so a reoccurring theme was always water conservation. How can we be more involved as an indoor venue or basketball team and be involved in water conservation? So I'm like, non-marine biologist, but I can try and find one. So through strategic, you know, tying back to my mindfulness conversation, I always looked at efficiencies and kind of doing something once, not having to do it twice. And so as we renovate new spaces, you know, I'm fortunate to inherit a 25-year-old building that needs a lot of love and care. It's thinking how we can put sustainability top of mind in these renovations that are going to give us these cost savings or reductions, to then go and approach the stakeholders that are involved in these community engagements or water conservation efforts with data or you know, proof to point towards. So when I first joined, we upgraded our scoreboard, our lighting system, our seating system, this huge project, and saw all the materials coming out. And my brain works with, I view items as materials, not as a chair, but as what went into that chair, and how can we salvage that chair? How can we maybe get some value back for it? Because there was value when we bought it. And so with this kind of mindset, and when we were removing our old material, you know, we turned that into a cost negative, which we would have usually done. And then I joined and turned it into a cost positive, well over 6 figures, which got the attention of the CFO. I was like, what's this new guy doing for us? And so as an initiative like that then I was able to go to these folks and point towards, hey, by doing these actions at the building and making these fan experiences, we're now, you know, this is where we can pull funding for to go do an initiative or go do something in the community that helps expand what we're doing outside these walls. So back in March, we took this mindset and we started an initiative with our artists especially, where we sort everything back at house. So every pound of aluminum and glass that we capture and recycle and weigh, we're making a donation on behalf of the artists to a community-driven, sustainability-focused nonprofit. And so we've been working with Rescue a Reef, which has been helping restore the coral reef line in Miami. And we share this with the artists and the manager and the team and our fans to be like, hey, when you're in our building, these are the practices we would love for you guys to kind of do here, recycle properly. We are sorting it, but we set them up for success to recycle properly, to make it easier on our team, and then kind of tell this message of this impact they're having. And we tell it to the artists too, from the experience you're creating for the fan, from choosing Miami in our venue, as well as the footprint we're leaving for them when they leave. And you know, part of that, how that we're able to get that off the ground, is back to those ROI wins or those examples of, hey, we're cleaning up the business over here, running, you know, question, why do we have those video boards on when there's no one in the building? That's drawing energy and power. Let's shut that off. Seeing those impacts on our bill financially, carbon emissions wise, helps me in my story, but then it helps you talk to those other stakeholders involved, such as the finance, the operations, the what have you, to kind of then make these narratives happen. So a whole lot of team involved, but it's looking at how the intention and being, you know, mindful of our actions, for sure.
Yeah, I think you're being humble by not sharing how many goal awards you've won. How many is that now?
So recently we were recognized for 35 different gold medals in various different categories, from energy, waste reduction, water efficiency, community engagement, or fan engagement, and actually an innovation award for our reuse project of our furniture. So we actually were going through suite renovation this summer, and is part of my task, and I made sure it was adamant that any functional items or chairs at work, let's get this out to communities that need it. So we worked with Miami-Dade County Public Schools, which is, underserved in volumes, and got them a lot of chairs for teachers that just don't even have chairs for their desks. A few universities, Barry College, FAU, and then even some architect schools got involved with our granite stone or wooden doors. I was just like, these are good materials. Do you want to come by and pick it up for projects and just give it a second life before we have to look at ways to recycle it or discard it? And so we did that and got recognized. It came out to roughly over 13,000 pounds diverted from the landfill because we found new homes for it, which is...
And then, you've set all these targets, but could be increasing your waste diversion rate, reducing single-use plastic, exploring on-site renewable energy options. But beyond these metrics, how do you plan to embed these initiatives within this Miami Heat experience for your fans and the community?
Yeah, so we've been looking at ways now, especially kind of having this footing of getting it now in our fans' face and getting it activated. So at the end of last season, we actually invited our composter to the venue to have an activation table, to teach people what compost is, to teach them that circularity of food. And that was actually, again, back to the ROI example, gave me some funding to bring our whole staff out to our compost farm, where we made a donation to a local community garden with compost made from the arena, and it got our own staff and involved with seeing what that compost is, and they're like, why we have to tell our fans this. And so we've been inviting them to see what that action looks like, see what that impact looks like, and even just help us and our composters advocate for why we need this. In Miami, it's definitely a hot button topic. I'm not gonna, gloss over it. There's a landfill crisis, so we're trying to do what we can to definitely avoid what we're sending to landfill and explain, hey, you can do this at such a high commercial volume. So we've been looking at ways to kind of run activations or campaigns or even shift our supply chain, as you mentioned, with alignment for our single-use plastic reduction and our waste diversion goals. How can we make it simple, though, for our fans? And how can we make it more compostable or recyclable items that we're providing, so they don't really have to do too much of the thinking, but they can see these materials and bring these habits home with them is what we're ultimately looking at, how that experience goes.
Yeah, I think it's clear here that athletes and venues can play a huge role, but we need more. We need more policy, more advocacy in order for these efforts to last. So, Lou, you've lobbied Congress. So how do athletes change the tone of these policy conversations in ways that scientists or executives can't?
It's very simple, because there's one aspect, we're talking about athletes and venues and teams and sponsors, but there's one aspect that the athlete has access to that scientists and even academics don't, and that is the media. And the media is the megaphone, and the media is why athletes are so influential, because they are seen not only at the venues themselves, but on television, et cetera, et cetera. So because they have a big following, and because the members of Congress, and both at the federal level and at the state level, they follow sports. I've seen it when there's a group of there's another organization called Protect Our Winters, and they are snow sports and now adventure sports. Athletes like they have climb, and they have trail running and mountain biking. And they also have skiers and snowboarders, many of whom are Olympians. They try to get together and have a lobbying day with, snow state legislators. They get in like that because, this is someone who won a medal or was an Olympian or a state champion. That automatically has sizzle, pizzazz, and also media attention. And you may have heard that politicians like that. They really do, especially when it's with not pesky questions of policy and such, but with, the athletes came. That's how it works.
Fair.
Regular citizen lobbyists, not as much.
Great answer. So, Merle, I think this is a timely question for you because recently one of your swims was canceled due to pollution. And I know past ones have been canceled as well, unfortunately. But how have you used these moments to push for broader awareness and change?
Yeah, well, those are the hard things when you deal with just not the weather, not just that it's overheated where you swim. And I want to clarify that I'm trying to work with the weatherman that when they have a summer and they say, outside is like, 100 degrees, they need to start talking how much is the water temperature. Because in Miami, we had almost 109 degrees in the water. Where are the corals? So you can guess they were bleached. And now if you think about your loved ones, you're not going to put your grandma or your children to the jacuzzi water for a long time, right? And we have hit the point where we might not have a summer where we can compete because just already the heat on the water temperature is dangerous. I mean, we lost the Olympian, Frank Grippen, in a World Cup. And nobody didn't do anything that time. And we have got to the point where all the funding goes to put up you train for that, you live for that race, and you get to the place where you can't compete because it's too hot. Not just that, you also have E. coli. And this summer, if I look at the news, there was like almost 23 million people under extreme pollution watch who couldn't go to the beach that day to enjoy beach day with their loved ones. Again, like I said, it's a blue gold what I'm dealing here. And just having those, also in Miami, we had a fish kill, and I had to put ventilator tubes inside of Miami for 12 hours to restart the circulation for oxygen. I'm not even on 35 and I'm doing these things. I'm already dealing with those things. I don't know what's gonna happen hopefully with my kids or my little mermaids soon. And the pollution problem, it's just growing left and right. And soon we're gonna have a problem that we don't even have a water to take a shower after an amazing basketball event. And it's becoming more rare, and sometimes I'm like, okay, that's all the negative stuff. How I'm gonna grow the muscle and be a little bit more smarter with my messaging is that let's go and figure out even cooler records then. Maybe my record shouldn't be 30 after 31 miles. Maybe it has to be something totally different, still with the tail, because the mermaid thing works, guys. But that just pushes you face on a wall and say, here I have to figure out something even crazier. And I am on something. I'm telling you, watch my social media until October 10. I can't tell you what I'm doing on that sense. But while I was, navigating and sitting there, and I got invited to be 100 most impactful world's list with the world leaders. Rockefeller is on the list. Hilton family is on the list. I was like, okay, they are tourist guys. They love to bring people together. But where is the sports tourist with emphasis with sustainability? And I realized that that's what I was missing. That's why I had to get all this bad news to understand my next step. And my next step is I created on a World Tourist Forum a department called Sports Tourism with emphasis with sustainability. It got accepted, and I'm working really hard. I hope Heat is coming to my panel next year. And honestly, when things go so south, that's a good thing. Listen to those signs. They're telling you something even better. And honestly, this is where comes a little bit my family to play. my parents grew up every day under communist regime. They went to school, they went to work, they went to play sports, and they knew one thing: freedom tastes good, and I'm here to fight for ocean freedom. So sometimes you get in those depressing things, and they just tell you that you have to change the course, but you don't lose the goal.
Love that.
Thank you.
You know, I think that's so bold. And speaking of bold, Rewild Your Campus has set a very bold goal, which is to eliminate synthetic pesticide use from all U.S. college campuses by 2030. So what can sports organizations learn from this kind of goal setting and climate action that you all are taking?
Yeah. I was reflecting on this a bit, and it is a bold goal, but you see a lot of these goals of we're going to go carbon neutral by 2050, and we think about our lives at that point, and we really have to act like this is urgent, because it is. And regardless of what's happening with the government, like, we have to do what we can to control this and to change this. And so we set an ambitious goal because it's the only choice that we have. We have to act like it's urgent. And I think when you think about sports, like especially professional teams, there are so many resources to make these things happen. If you just set ambitious goals, we can figure out the ways to make it happen. And I was thinking about sports, and you think about breaking the record for the mile, like getting under 4 minutes. Like, people never thought that was possible. And then one person did it, and then all of a sudden more people are doing it because there was just a thing in your mind that you thought it wasn't possible, and then you see someone doing it, and then more people can do it. And so we need the leaders in sports who have the resources to just set ambitious goals and do it, and then other people, other organizations, institutions will follow, because they're seeing that it is possible, and we're seeing all of these things happen with professional sports and athletes. So yeah, I think that there's, who knows if we'll do it. I hope we can, and I really believe that we will, and I hope other people will see that and follow that lead.
I love that. So sometimes policy and advocacy can be abstract, but venues can make it much more tangible. So Zach, what do you think the innovations or commitments of sustainable venues of the future will be?
It always varies. I mean, nowadays you're seeing certain, especially ownership groups, take more pride and passion in getting their buildings to be more sustainable, as sustainable as can be. So I think it's always different. I always say it's hard to say what that perfect sustainable venue is, because you're dealt different cards in different areas. And then also, if you have an existing building versus a brand new building, you can start from scratch versus you have this building that you have to try and become more sustainable. And how do you get unique or innovative with it? For us, it's been looking at upgrading to all low flow fixtures, upgrading to LED lights and occupancy sensors. We had an aggressive reduction of single-use plastic, literally come from the top down, from our ownership group and our leadership group. How are we going to do that? And it's been coming up with new creative, partnerships or even avenues. We've brought in a vendor that literally takes humidity from the air and makes it drinkable water, and that's been pretty, groundbreaking and huge for us, that we're able to now source the water from Miami and provide it to our fans and reduce the single-use plastic and tell that story about water conservation. They're a partner that wants to help tell that initiative and alleviate the pressures on the water table and talk about sea level rise, and they want to look at this from a larger scale. And it's been kind of setting those goals and then kind of looking at how to resolve it. And it becomes a team thing, and how everyone in that venue has to be a part of it and visualize it and just kind of work together. Everything's always changing and evolving, I think, in the space overall.
Thanks. So last year, we had a very similar event here, and somebody that was on the panel, Amy Engerbretson, professional big mountain skier, she said something that stuck with me, and that is, people always asked her how she wasn't terrified to drop into big mountain lines in Alaska. And she said, the truth is, I'm terrified. I'm so scared. But that fear and learning how to cope with that and do things that are uncomfortable, that's exactly what she needed to step into climate advocacy. So the last question that I'll ask from our panelists, what lessons from sports can we bring into climate and sustainability work? And I want to start with Mackenzie.
Well, obviously we see that sports has a huge following. I learned this fact today, you correct me if I'm wrong, but sports has the second largest following after faith around the world. And that was really interesting to me. And I think people want to be a part of something. You want to be part of a team, or you want to cheer on a team and feel like you have community in that way. And I think we're missing that in the environmental movement and the climate movement in a lot of ways, because it feels like this very big issue, and it's hard to know how to plug into it. But I think the truth is we all want to be part of a community, and I think more people would be interested in doing something if it was easier, and you know, if there were more opportunities where people can plug in. And so I think we can learn a lot from that, and also making it fun and entertaining. It can't be doom and gloom. You know, people are more interested in watching sports games than they are about the news or the next climate report or whatever, and there's a reason for that. It helps, it brings you joy, it's entertaining, and so bringing all of that to the climate movement. And I think what I love about our work at Rewild Your Campus is it is very tangible. Like, we're teaching students how to make change directly on their campus, how empowering them so that they know, you do have a say in how your landscapes are managed, and you do have the power to say, I don't want to be exposed to toxic pesticides. And then it's not just about changing that on your campus, but they're going to graduate and go on to, we've had, former students that we've worked with now running sustainability at school districts, or even running for office and things like that. So it has ripple effects in the community. And I think in all the ways that we can just distill down these issues and make people feel like a part of a group to fight for that is a huge lesson we can take away. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to Marla.
Well, the thing is, we all have fears, right? Like I shared, my parents' fear was they don't know what's going to happen with the country, but they knew what was their goal. And athletes, in some sense, I'm also a businesswoman. I run 7 businesses, literally on Ocean, by the way. I opened my company in Ocean because Estonia government is on blockchain, and you can do that. I wish you guys join with the e-residency. But the one thing what I always teach people around me who do a business with me is the same things when I'm scared in a business, I'm scared in Ocean. And literally, I swim with sharks every day, and they teach me so much that sometimes your fear is taking too much space on your head instead of reaching the goal, right? And athletes, when we have those goals, we want to go and train for it, we show up on a days without knowing if we're gonna have a medal. And the same thing we're doing on business, and the same thing we're doing on the climate space. We're showing up, we don't know if we're gonna inspire people, but we're showing up, we growing the muscle while navigating through those maybe sometimes painful journeys, but it ends up always to be even better than we think. And the shark will swim away, right? And I always, now I go around the world, and I think, that the things while I was scared in a business, first of all, half of these businessmen doesn't have balls to swim with sharks. So they have to listen to mermaid, right?
Oh my gosh.
And
I love that this is recorded.
That's fine, put it on the internet. Grow your climate muscle with the shark. But literally, we as athletes, if you tell us the warm-up is at 3 a.m. in the morning, we are so driven. We are such a high-performance people that we show up at 3 a.m. to win a medal. And that's the same what happens in climate. Sometimes we know what we want, and we are so scared, but we really need to start showing up. And the one thing when I teach everybody around me is that You have the power to tell the business that I don't want this plastic straw. You have the power to tell your friend next to you, don't accept that bag. I will give you one, or let's take it on our hands. You don't need 2 bags for a milk, come on. You have the power to do 1% better today than you did yesterday. And the same is in sports. You can go and fix your little technique to swim faster, and with sharks.
You're right. I love that. Zach?
Yeah, so I know similar to what's been discussed is I always see that unification that sports brings for people, but at the end of the day, especially how we view it, is once that event ends, there's a winner and a loser. People are going home, but like you're going home to you're back to your own community and neighborhood. So we've always valued and looked at ways how can we lessen that impact that we're having on that community, but also giving empowering that person to have that voice to do change. I often get how we've been rolling out recycling more in the 2 years I've been there to our fans, and people come up to me and tell me they're banning the recycling in the neighborhoods, or they don't do X, Y, Z, which is just shocking to me at first. And I reassure them that we're doing this at their venue and how they can kind of help advocate for it, or like the little things they can take with them when they leave, whether it be, hey, I couldn't find parking at your venue. And I always go, well, we don't have much parking to offer, but we're in a prime location for public transportation. I apologize you had that bad experience as a guest, but here's a list of some free options to get to our venue on time and reasonable, reducing your carbon impact as well on the earth. So it's always looking for creative ways of that. Win or lose, if the Heat wins, which we like it when they win, but regardless, we're doing what we can as an organization to reduce that impact of putting that event up for the fans so they can continue joining, and then giving them those, empowering them with those options to do their part as well, whether it be public transportation, how they're interacting within our venue with the items or whatever, and hoping that they can take that home into, their own lives. And it's always a great story to hear when I hear our composter call me and like, you're not going to believe who would call me, because it could have been a small restaurant or business saw we're composting, and they call that company right away and ask for 5 compost carts or whatever, and because they saw we were doing it at the venue. So to me, that's even more rewarding. I'm helping these small, composters grow at a larger scale in Miami as we continue to grow our composting and zero waste journey. So it's looking at the small wins, I think, for sure.
I love that. And last but not least, Lou?
Well, so since we deal with, EcoAthletes deals with athletes, 220 plus. Our mission is to inspire and coach athletes to lead climate action. The way we work to do it is to provide those champions with the tools to advance from climate curious to climate leader. And what does that mean in real life? Well, we talk about something, our number one hashtag is hashtag climate comeback. And this is the metaphor that I think speaks to the power of athletes and the power of sport to make a difference. We are behind in the climate game. The scoreboard, the scoreboard is against us. We have to know this because athletes know what the score is at all times. Athletes, we need a comeback to make climate, to provide a habitable, healthy climate for us and for the succeeding generations. Athletes do comebacks. Accountants, not so much. Although, talk to your accountant on April 14th if you haven't gotten all your deductions in. But generally speaking, when you think of comebacks, you ain't thinking of accountants, you're not thinking of dentists, and I can say that because my dad was my dentist. You're thinking of athletes. Every sports movie you've ever seen is some kind of comeback. Rocky, I mean, you name it, Miracle. We athletes also are constantly, as Merle was talking about, course correcting. Something's not working. They go into the halftime locker room, or they may be swimming without using their arms and with just their core and their monofin, and but they're dealing with current that's not going your way. How do you change? How do you deal with that?
Painful.
Right? But this is what we must do in the climate movement, and we need, and athletes are so well positioned to, because they are doing comebacks, they are always, as Merle was talking about, looking to get better each and every day, a little bit. Like, that's one thing I've gotten by talking to all these champions is the athlete mentality. One of our champions is Gary Gilliam. He played 7 years in the NFL as an offensive lineman, and he would say, you know what, Lou, I was an undrafted free agent going to the Seattle Seahawks, and they're coming off the Super Bowl, and how am I going to make that team? Every day after practice, I would go to our position coach and say, how can I get a little bit better tomorrow? What do I need to do to get it? Now, like, as a non-athlete, I'm not thinking about that in my life. Like, okay, have breakfast, shave, go do my, no. How do you get better every day? Well, how do we do that in the climate world? Okay? And this is doable. It's also going to be the hardest thing many of us have worked on ever. But athletes do hard stuff. Athletes do the impossible. I rest my case.
I think that's a fantastic way to end. So I've been asking all the questions up here, and I'm sure our audience has some questions. We can take a handful. We're a little over time, but let's take a handful of questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and somebody will come to you with a mic. All right, let's take the one that's all the way in the back. Michael? Okay, orange shirt, you can go next.
Hi, so this is a question for you, Lou. You were talking about how there's three main problems that your athletes face that keep them from wanting to be involved in the climate conversation, and that one of those things was, how do I deal with my own impact as an athlete? And I was just curious if you could provide some more details on how you provide tools for the athletes to kind of mitigate this problem.
Great question. One of the things we provide is what we call climate communications for athletes and to the champions. And this is something that they can choose to take advantage of or not. But those who have chosen it, the thing that they bring most often, I'm going to say 75% of the time, is the issue of the impact related to flying specifically. And so we talk through it and we role play, and there are a couple things we talk about. One that is really important and takes a little time to kind of get through is that, we say there are things, when someone criticizes you for being an athlete, and who are you to talk about climate change? You're flying all over the place. And assuming they're not trolling and they're really like, oh, they're legitimate criticism, we say there are two things. One thing you think but you never say, and then one thing you think and you say. So the thing you think but you don't say is that the person who's criticizing you, who may well be a troll or not, they also, while they're criticizing you for taking that flight, they're also demanding that you appear on their television screen, that you are there to entertain them, that you are on their computer screen, that they can read about you in the paper, if people are still reading newspaper, but you know what I'm saying. So we say this to give them confidence, to, in a sense, defang the power that they're giving the critic. That's what you don't, but you don't say that, because then that's going to get you into that kind of negative, you're bad loop. So you don't say it. What you can say is something to the effect of, well, you know what? I'm with you. I don't want to be causing these emissions any more than you want me to be doing that. But this is the world I have been born into, and you have been born into, and this is how we have sports, and this is my business. However, that does not mean we can't do better. We can do better. And will you join me in an effort to be better? What would that look like? Oh, I don't know. We would like to advocate for sports to fund the innovation in electric aviation. How would you feel about that? Ask them an open-ended question. How would you feel about that? Then you're starting a conversation. So, and there are more things we get into on this issue, but those are two. Does that answer the question?
Maybe she wants to join with the eco-athletes.
Orange shirt.
This is kind of a criticism, kind of touching on what you were just saying, question for the mermaid and maybe others. People say, celebrities, athletes, stay in your lane. I don't want to hear your political takes. I don't want to hear what you have to say about climate. I disagree, obviously. I care deeply about climate. I think everyone should be talking about climate, including like thought leaders and athletes. But are there some athletes that say, I don't want to risk alienating part of my fan base because I am taking or what are considered like woke or liberal or democratic positions?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because I run into so many athletes like that. And I always say that, number one, I come from Estonia, so I value putting an Estonian cap on. And those are my values. And those are where I want people to understand that I'm here not to save just me and you, but all of us. And sometimes I tell to the athletes that, you know, it's so often that we have to, you know, listen to coaches, we have to be quiet, we have to be part of the organization. But maybe we should turn the communication more positive and say, we are here to inspire, let's do it together. You know, like for example, I'm dealing with the World Aquatics right now regarding of losing swimming caps, right? They're losing swimming caps during the race because they want to win the medal, but that's a pollution. So I kind of suggested that let's educate athletes, not just say that that's bad, but let's educate them with adding 10-second penalty. It happens in Formula One. You see, sometimes we have to find solutions with the communication, but the communication has to be inspiring. And I get it. There are people who are saying, I don't want to listen to you at all. And you say, I value for that. That's your love language. I got it.
I love that. Let's take one more question right here.
Thank you. Interesting conversation. Question for Miami Heat. Kind of from a corporate perspective, I haven't heard anybody mention the word greenwashing. But how do you experience that being in that organization that has other priorities maybe? They are not there to be green, to be recycling.
Sure, yeah. It's been quite the learning curve, I think, for sure, since I've joined. Because I think even now there's the term of green hushing for not celebrating or rewarding or sharing the ideas of what you're doing. So, I mean, for us, it's been always putting forth content and stuff that we're adamant and that we can back and talk about. And it hasn't played too much of an issue because we're able to point to these stories or relate it or make it personable. Having your great marketing team to kind of help you is always this disconnect of me explaining the science or the data behind them and it going right over their head, and they get really scared because they don't want to greenwash, they don't want to mislead. And it's been a lot of kind of educating and teaching them, hey, since I've joined, we've changed our process. I walked them to our sorting area and showed them what we're doing. I walked them to infield and seeing the compost so they can more confidently go out and tell this story and not kind of fear the greenwashing narrative out there, or that can kind of arise, because we have the whole operations and everything to kind of back it in the sense. And that's how we've continued to kind of grow and tell our story without trying to mislead anyone. You know, we take a stance, especially being a private company or a corporation, of we're happy to take a stance against any political views or whatever, if it's an organizational value or like culture. You know, that he often talk about their culture, and that's what we've been slowly kind of embedding from our ownership down, of this culture of how sustainability matters, how it's important to our day-to-day, and how it should be top of mind for everyone that works there. I recently got a call from the owner himself. I have a bunch of cardboard. Can I recycle it? And I was like, oh my God. I panicked. And I was like, you sure can. And he showed up with like 6 SUVs packed perfectly. I applauded him too, because he flattened it all, packed to the brim, and we baled it and recycled it. And I sent him a picture and a notion of, thank you. This was like 1,600 pounds of cardboard that we were able to recycle. And so it's those small things like that that
Where did all that cardboard come from?
So his family does a toy drive every Christmas. So it was like the Harrison family toy drive, where they donated toys to local foundations in the area, and he had all this. And it was just quite the funny conversation. I'm happy to help, and I was able to show him that impact of what he was doing, and kind of keep preaching that and telling that of like, hey, I have the receipts. I have the receipts to show that it got recycled and improved it, and keep growing on that.
I love
Inspiring.
that. Yeah. So unfortunately, I do have to close this out because we're out of time. Trust me, I would be here all night asking them questions, as I'm sure you all would love to. We can do that at the networking reception after this. But I just want to end with this, that powering on is more than just flipping on some LED lights. It's really showing up every single day like it's game day. So let's play for the planet. Huge thank you to these amazing panelists, to my team, and all of you for joining us here tonight.